Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that everybody can hear me. If not, I will shout even louder. Welcome to the DKF 225 panel discussion, the keynote panel discussion. In all of the 15 years of DKF, it has been a tradition to open the conference with the market data panel. Every year we highlight a particular aspect of market data management, and this anniversary year is no different. In today's dynamic financial landscape, access to relevant, accurate and timely market data is of paramount importance. Yet navigating the complex web of licensing agreements is increasingly challenging. As data sources proliferate and usage rights become more stringent, end-user firms face a growing burden in ensuring both compliance and managing cost. Moreover, the cost of market data only keeps rising, and the complexity of data feed landscape is growing in equal measure. Managing all of this has become very challenging from a technical, commercial, and risk management point of view. So, with me here are some business leaders from our world of financial information services, with whom we will discuss these challenges and how to best deal with them. They are going to introduce themselves. Babken, can I ask?
Thanks, Ajay. My name is Babken Hakobyan. I'm with DekaBank for the last 4 years. 3 of them I have spent with risk management organization, where I was responsible for demand management of all market data consumptions, and also worked on a central market data dissemination platform when we delivered market data to all key risk functions, finance functions, and also some other areas. About a year ago, I changed my role, and I'm now responsible for the market data license and invoice management practice at DekaBank. I'm responsible for all the market data contracts and assuring compliance with those for all market data within Deka Group.
Okay, thank you. Gerrit?
My name is Gerrit Marx. Good morning, everyone. I work for Deutsche Börse Group. I'm the head of products and licensing for market data and services, where we manage provision and licensing of data from around 30 different venues and sources within Deutsche Börse Group and outside of Deutsche Börse Group. Before joining Deutsche Börse in 2019, I worked in different departments in a German bank, in capital markets, as a trader, structure, risk manager, and product manager.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Schut, and I'm working at BIQH as business director. And BIQH is a provider of market data management solutions in the cloud. And well, happy to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you all. So, Goeksel. Goeksel, the best man in the house.
If you don't mind.
I don't.
Yeah, my name is Goeksel Yildiz. Good morning, everybody. So, Director of License Management at Börse. And I'm working in the market data industry now for more than 20 years, covering both the financial and the energy sector. And yeah, over the years, I have to admit that it looks like market data licensing has become a critical function, not only for compliance, but also for cost controlling and for strategic decision making. And yeah, I support companies to manage their market data efficiently and sustainably. And at first, we work together with our clients, we support our clients in turning licensing challenges into opportunities. And I'm happy to be here today, part of this panel, and looking forward to the exchange.
My apologies, Goeksel, but I'm a bit
All fine,
nervous about the timing, because we have a hard stop at 10 because of the conference program, of course. Thank you all. So end-user firms are finding that market data licenses are increasingly difficult to manage efficiently, especially with the diversity of data vendors and systems in place. But before discussing these challenges, let's get a bit clearer on actually what we mean with market data licenses. Babken, you're head of market data license and invoice management at DekaBank. How would you describe market data license management?
Well, this is not a straightforward question because it encompasses so many activities. So in general terms, market data license management will be all activities involved in a market data life cycle within the organization where we have to ensure that everybody stays compliant with the legal aspects of market data usage and also the contractual terms, because market data is in some way or another an IP, intellectual property, and we have to respect that. But also we have to make sure that we get the right amount of data in the right places via the right delivery channels in order to ensure our products going good and our business processes functioning well. But this is not an easy task as well, because this got very complex in recent times. So compared to 10 years ago or 15 years ago, the contracts were easier to read, the usage purposes were clearer defined, and the terms were clear. And we are getting more and more complexity within the pricing policies, within the usage terms of the data, and to navigate all this landscape is pretty difficult nowadays.
Yep. So a big problem is the growing complexity of market data licenses and their diversity. With Gerrit, we have a representative of one of those organizations that caused all of this. So Gerrit, can you explain, primarily from the vantage point of a security exchange, but maybe also generally how we ended up where we are now with market data licenses?
Sure, yeah, I can elaborate a bit on our policies, why we changed the one or the other thing, and what the background was. I would like to start with some general notes also. I mean, in recapturing also my career, or when I started working 20 years ago, as you just said, many things have changed. I mean, one point, starting data sources in general. We have massive increase in the amount of data sources, massive increase in exchanges, in venues. This is caused by, of course, new asset classes that came up. We have now crypto, and we have crypto exchanges. I think also on the index side, ESG ratings, all this kind of stuff wasn't there 15, 20 years ago. It all came up with the new sources. There are new data provisions, new licensing contracts. Sometimes not only the contract is the problem, but also, of course, the requirements, the admin processes behind it. That's definitely one topic. Also, in general, on the intermediary side, a lot of things have changed. We now have, the terminal has increased massive in terms of functionality, in terms of use cases. We have multi-broker execution platforms that now are there, provide data. So on that side, also a lot of things change. This was sometimes also caused by technology. Technology changes brings me to the changes in terms of use cases. Also on the user side, on the consumer side, many things have changed. Also the whole financial market, specific the capital markets players, have changed. Back in the days, the investment banks were the one who did the market making on our exchanges, also on Xetra and Eurex. These days, we have highly electronified, quite small companies who are doing everything with their algos and are responsible for 80% of the trading volumes on our exchanges. So, yeah, use cases have also changed. Last thing, regulation, specifically best execution, for instance. So talking about the diversity of sources, the diversity of options to trade, then you have regulation like best execution, where actually obliges banks or maybe even asset managers to connect to all the different potential trading venues to find the best one for their execution. So this all has changed. Coming in detail to, just to mention two examples on what we changed on our side. First of all, I think our licensing model structurally has maybe changed every 5 years in a major way, not more than that. But we, for instance, at one point in time, CFD providers came to us and said, how can I use your current model? Do I have to report every single user that I have and pay data fees for it? So we came up with a solution for them and said, okay, we adapt our model, we create a new use case, CFD providers, and which fits more to their purposes. Same, of course, on the non-display side. A lot of exchanges have changed the way they define use cases on the non-display side. We, for instance, have introduced unit of counts there 3 years ago to just be able to take into account the different scope of usage of our customers. Yeah. And in the end, I sometimes find myself also realizing or thinking about how it was when I started 20 years ago, when actually hundreds of traders were sitting in front of terminals, doing their quoting via Excel spreadsheets, and this was the use case. And easily, market data licensing, an access, you pay a fee, and that's it. This has significantly changed. I wouldn't totally damn it. I think this is innovation in the financial industry. Market data licensing have adapted, have also changed. I think with new technologies, we have tools to manage it, and with all the expertise from all the people sitting here, I think we are able, and we have to cope with it, and we are able to manage it in some kind of way.
Yep. So now we understand a bit better what the background is in the evolution of market data licenses. Let's turn to some real use cases. You pointed already to it, Gerrit. Bernard, can you please take us through one or two use cases that you have that you have seen, perhaps as part of your efforts to acquire or onboard clients?
Well, maybe first of all, it's good to mention that BIQH is in between data vendors and consumers. So we are not connecting with exchanges directly. But yeah, there are many examples actually. One of them would be a big bank, and they were using this big market data database of one of the bigger data vendors. So, of course, they had a license to use this database, and they agreed upon the data fields, the products in there, instruments, these kind of things. So that was all in order. They were starting to use it. We were getting the invoices, and it was all looking okay. But at a certain moment in time, well, there was this audit going on from this data vendor, and they found out that there was a big overusage, actually. But the strange thing was, it was not visible in the invoices. So then a lot of question marks, of course, and a lot of research. Took a lot of time, actually. And in the end, it led to a back bill. And the funny, well, not funny, but the thing was here that access was not restricted. So this customer could grab any data they would like from the database, although they were not licensed at all. And this is where platforms like BIQH come in, I think, to really make sure that these kind of things cannot happen. So taking a look at the contracts and making sure that these, well, restrictions and limitations are met within the entitlement layer, so to say, and that these things don't happen anymore. And another, well, interesting example, I would say, is from an asset manager. They were planning to switch a data vendor. So they had to, well, basically remove the data from the first data vendor. And as we all know, within market data, you're not buying the data, but you're basically renting the data. So they had to give it back. But the problem here was that the data was all over the place. It was in databases, middleware. It was even in PowerPoint presentations of salespeople working at the asset manager. So there was not a way to see where the data ended up. So they couldn't remove the data from vendor one. So they couldn't switch. And there was no visibility at all, basically, to see where the data was being used. And also in this case, platforms like BIQH and our competitors, of course, we try to help to have visibility on the data by having data lineage insights, traceability, and really make sure that the data doesn't end up in the wrong hands, so to say. But it is kind of hard, especially in cloud environments. And maybe we are going to talk about it later on as well. But market data is pushed to cloud more and more. Yeah. And there you don't have to control it all. Yeah. But that's for later, I guess.
Let's see what we can cover. So market data license can not only be found at financial services firms, but also at other companies like energy trading companies. Goeksel, you have been working in both sectors. What similarities and what differences do you see as far as market data license management is concerned?
That's a good question, Evert-Jan. Because on the surface, it seems like financial and energy markets are quite different. But when it comes to market data licensing, there are a lot of similarities. And a few key differences, which needs to be considered as well. When we start with the similarities, both markets rely heavily on market data, on external data. It's a strategic asset. Imagining a trading house, doesn't matter, energy or banking, without market data is not imaginable. And whether for trading, risk, compliance. And in both sectors, licensing, data licensing is getting more and more complex. Vendors are coming up with many different types of licensing models. And that's something the companies in both sectors have to manage in a way. Yeah? And vendors are also coming more and more with how you use the data, where do you use the data, access control, and about redistribution, about derived data. These are topics which is making the discussion about license management more and more complex. But at the same time, the cost is rising in both sectors. And we are talking about 44.3 billion cost overall globally for market data spent. It's a lot. And the pressure is growing for both companies when it comes to access control and staying compliant. And both companies are investing in data management and access control and topics to be able to handle it. On the other hand, the differences, what are the main or key differences which needs to be considered? Financial markets are more advanced. They do that for several years now. They have dedicated teams and systems in place for years, most of them at least, and they also have regular audits. They're used to that, even though they don't want to have it, but it's how it is. And the licensing models are more developed in a way. On the other hand, the energy market is catching up. They're not as advanced as the financial markets. And the data is more fragmented. They have more data. They have capacity data, plenty of weather data, renewables data. And that makes the situation more complex. And moreover, apart from the commercial data, energy companies are using a lot of publicly available data, TSO data, government data, how the snow are high in certain mountains in Switzerland are, and so on. And that makes the situation also complex. And when it comes to access control, energy trading companies are not as advanced as financial companies, and the controls are not always there yet. So to summarize that, actually, both are facing the same storm, but sitting in different boats. Both are facing the same challenges, but have different approaches to handle it. That's it is.
Thank you. We will talk, when we have time, talk a bit more about IP rights and how that is affected or not, as the case may be, with alternative data, right? As Goeksel said, there's more and more unstructured alternative data coming into the space of market data management, and it's not always clear how that is being managed. But let's now turn to a relevant piece of regulation related to licensing. In the MIFIR review final report published in December, ESMA described the obligation to make pre- and post-trade data available on a reasonably commercial basis, and provided the draft RTS, that's the regulatory technical standards for RCB, reasonable commercial basis, that describes how fees for market data can be set in the future. Fees for market data. Gerrit, can you explain what the status here is and what market participants should be expecting from this regulation?
Sure, yeah. Let me first quickly put that new regulation into perspective of the regulatory landscape. In the end, MiFID II, introduced in 2018, addressed many market data topics. Amongst other things, reasonable commercial basis have been introduced, regulation around delayed data, data formats, and other things. And it specifically aimed to increase transparency. Some things worked out, others did not. I think markets are now actually more fragmented. We are talking about, again, the problems, the issues to get access to data to manage all of these. So in 2021, ESMA published additional guidelines around that, and now the next step is happening. Now these guidelines and specific adoptions will be further detailed and implemented into a delegated act. The timing or the time plan is, as far as we know, as following. So the adoption of the RTS by the European Commission is expected to happen until the end of this month, end of May. Then there will be a scrutiny period for the European Council and European Parliament until August. Then usually it takes 20 days after publication to entry into force, it's called. So we are in September. And then because of major effects, major impacts that this could lead to, there will be a 9 months period of adaptation for so-called authorized market data providers that have a current licensing framework in place. So like a period of 9 months to actually change it. So we are finally then in the middle of next year where we can expect new or licensing changes to become effective. What can be expected in detail? I think first of all a lot of work for everyone to understand, to implement changes for the providers. I mean, we are currently looking at that and waiting for the final publication to think about changes we will implement in our models, we have to implement. And then, of course, also the users, the consumers will need to take that into account. In terms of licensing models, based on the assumption that the draft RTS will not significantly change in the final version, it can be expected that there will be less usage categories. So they are addressing the point of like having many different usage categories. On the other hand, they are not clearly defined in the regulation. So maybe there will be less usage categories, but maybe not standardized. But this is definitely a point that will be addressed. There are restrictions on the diversity of unit of counts that are also addressed there. So we can expect that licensing frameworks, reporting, declaration processes might change for the European data providers.
When you say European data providers, does it only include security exchanges or
No.
all trading platforms?
Yes, it's addressed at, say, all the trading platforms that are also addressed in MiFID II. So including MTFs, for instance.
Multilateral trading facilities.
Alternative, I think there are, of course, differences in detail, but in the end, this addresses everyone. That does not address data vendors. It addresses the sources of the data. Mm-hmm. And it will hopefully lead to more standards in Europe, but probably to a differentiated approach than the existing ones that is applied by global market data providers or global exchanges. So right now we have to wait for the final release, and I hope the industry will find the right balance to adopt the model, to adapt the models, but and increase simplicity, transparency, and on the other hand will still be able to keep the standards in some kind of way to be able to differentiate also. Simplicity is always helpful, definitely, but on the other hand, that's what we are seeing, the consumer side has also, as we discussed, massively diversified, differentiated, and not every small asset manager wants to pay the same data fees as the global top-tier investment bank or the global top vendor.
Yeah. And what is the connection here with the European consolidated tape? Are they somehow intertwined, or is it really different initiatives?
I think they are somehow connected. I mean, it's different regulations. I mean, next to the review of the RCB stuff, there's also other things in MiFIR that are reviewed. The provision of data, also data formats, specific flags. These are also affected. Consolidated tape, from my point of view, the topic there and the implementation there is a different story in terms of timeline. It will be also an alternative to get data from. I think timing now is planned for the consolidated tape around end of 26 to be finally introduced, I think.
And then only for derivatives first, if I'm not mistaken.
For equities and ETFs first.
Equities, ETFs.
Derivatives
later.
Probably later. Yes, so we see that as separate topics. We need to cope with both of it. We need to provide our data to the CTP at one point in time, but these changes will come before that upfront.
Yeah, okay, good, thanks. Now, on the topic of IP rights, we have about 5 minutes. At DekaBank, you must also be taking in more data from different sources, different, character, different time series, different type of data, like Gerrit already described at the start, right? The whole landscape has changed dramatically. How are you dealing with that? In other words, does that also make the whole question about how to manage this data from a licensing point of view more complicated? That's a really tricky question. Do you have a feeling that you have control over it all, what's coming in?
It's a very tricky question because, we're getting more and more transparency within our market data inventory. And we are getting to a point where we have very good defined governance processes, especially with respect to demand management within the business departments and products that we are using and use cases that we are getting. We have some kind of centralized governance with a representative in each business department. They are managing all these complexities. But still, I would say the complexity of the market data is so immense currently, and it gets even worse with every year, because we have actually 2 sides or 3 major sides in the market data environment. First part is the RJ exchanges, which are partly changing the policies every year, and you are getting into the trouble to validate whether the policies that you have to comply with are really current in your organization, or you are falling into a trap because you didn't miss a notification that the policy changes starting from 1st of January and a definition has changed. For example, it can go down to some nitty-gritty stuff like what is the definition of an application, or what is the definition of a derived data use or non-display use. And once you have this in place, you cannot be really sure that you are still in compliance the next year. You have to validate it over and over and over again, and this causes a lot of work, and you have to raise the staff in order to do this. And this is the implicit cost of market data pricing raise. So because we don't have only the price tag on it, we also have the implicit cost and technology that we are investing in, the staff that we are investing in, and the governance structures, the new processes. And this whole effort is implicit cost of market data, actually, and many underestimate this. The second major player are OTC or broker-dealer or third-party specialist data providers, like any kind of interdealer brokers, rating agencies, index providers. And everything is getting there very complicated. While you can get a lot of transparency on the pricing on the exchange side, you cannot have this on the specialist side because they are not classified as a trading venue as per MiFIA. And they are not falling into the Article 13. And you don't have this kind of RCB basis discussion. You are just getting individual prices. And that's where we are getting into trouble. And the index use cases, this is also the third part, and this is also getting worse and worse because there are many more use cases involved.
But my personal opinion on that is that many asset managers have started to use index products so much more than they did 10 to 20 years ago, right? So there's become a lot of dependability on providers of those data categories, not just index data, but also credit ratings agency. Basically outsourcing your performance management and your risk management to the likes of index providers and credit rating agencies. So those that's another example of where use cases have become more complex, right? You're dependent on providers of that kind of information. But so what we're going to do about it then? If the world for people like yourself is only getting more complex, what can we do? And then now looking at the others who are actually coming up with solutions, is there any way that people like Babken can be helped?
Well, from my perspective at least, what we try to do for our customers is to do a continuous sanity checking. Like, okay, you have all these licenses in place, you have this data license, but if we look at your usage, we're seeing like maybe you can skip 20% of what you are licensed for, basically. So I guess that's an important one. And I think there's also a responsibility for both the data vendors or exchanges, but also the customers, to understand licensing better. So I guess it's up to the vendors and exchanges to explain how these licensing models work. But there's also a responsibility for the customer, I would say. Everybody touching market data should at least understand a bit of detail about that it's not for free, basically, that you cannot redistribute it to all kind of places. So yeah, and finally, I would say there's a big need of standardization in terms of licensing.
Yeah.
So regional commercial basis would be interesting for the exchange level, but I'm curious to know whether this will also happen maybe in the vendor space.
I've heard the word standardization in panel discussions for the last 20 years.
Yeah. I know.
It never happens.
I'm still young, eh?
Goeksel, you have the final word as a compensation for me overlooking you at the start.
Yeah, I mean, end of the day, it's an education process. I remember years ago when we talked about derived data, there was no derived data topic, okay? You know, you could get the data and it wasn't such a topic like today. And now the licensing areas and the way of usage of data is changing again. We are talking about AI tools, we're talking about cloud solutions. And the discrepancy between how you license your data, what is written in the contract, and how you really use the data internally is getting bigger and bigger. That's something needs to be get more closed. Not to be non-compliant, not to end up with penalties, and at the same time, it's a strategic asset, and companies realized how important that is to get the right data as fast as possible. And when we talk about the data catalogs, when we talk about finding the right data, using the right data, can be a strategic decision-making, and business can earn really money with that. And in companies, having that understanding is much more, they're much more developed, and they take market data license management serious as a critical function and not like just a procurement department, just go and buy licenses. And I mean, and we are at Force offering our clients to discuss these topics, to see where the challenges are, and to support them, turning these challenges into opportunities. Because when you do that, it's advantage. And when you say, boy, they could do it themselves, of course, but there's always in this fast changing and growing market expertise from outside, like a fresh expertise, it's always an advantage for these companies. And you cannot just stay and say, we have done everything regarding market data licensing. It will never be done because there are two sides, vendors, they will not say we have done everything. They will develop their products, and the buying sides, they have to find their solutions, how to handle it.
Yeah. All right. Well, we did quite well on the time management, but no time for questions, I'm afraid. Thank you all for listening to this panel discussion, and thank Goeksel, Bernard, Gerrit, and Babken. Thank you. Sehr gut.